Hi, everyone. This is Sandy Alt reporting from the wild, and this is the audio podcast companion to my blog on Substack. This is episode 15. You may find yourself. Right now, among a host of things in my well-stocked larder, I have an ample supply of coffee and 2 big packages of toilet paper. Years ago, these 2 things used to be significant survival benchmarks when I lived in a cabin in the mountains. With these 2 well-stocked, I could write a book in my typical binge-writing fashion without having to stop and go out for days, weeks even. There was always something around to eat if I foraged through the pantry or the fridge. But if I was deep in a creative streak and ran out of either of these 2 necessities, that would be the coup de grace that would break it, forcing me to throw on my coat over my plaid pajama bottoms or sweats and drive up the mountain to the village store. That same level of preparedness was good if we got 3 feet of snow or lost power for a couple days, as we often did in the backcountry. The worst thing that could happen back then was to look up and find yourself out of one or both of these subsistence items, or firewood. But those were simpler times. Having spent so much of my adult life in the wild, I think it's fair to say that I'm nearly always pretty well ready and reasonably capable to meet whatever moment arrives. I am resilient, crafty, and creative, and that's why I've been trying to prepare for what is already befalling us in this country today and for what could be yet to come. Here's a promise. I'm going to bring you an uplifting and awe-inspiring story from the wild before we are done together here. But first, let's see where we find ourselves now. We are not in an idyllic world where our biggest concern might be running out of coffee or toilet paper and having to break a streak to go out and buy some more. Today, you may find yourself, in the words of the Talking Heads, living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world. And that's because we have, in the past 4 months, suddenly found ourselves living in another world, in a shotgun shack of a crumbling democracy ruled by a corrupt cabal of fascists and cruelty addicts, of lawless liars and billionaire power junkies in the throes of achieving full-on authoritarian tyranny. And what we are most in danger of running out of are our rights and freedoms and our democracy. And if we run out of them, we can't just go to the store and buy more. I hope that most of you find yourself done with denial, already joining with others to figure out how to grapple with where we all find ourselves today. I hope you are bringing your full creative imagination and dedication to this moment, because this is not, again, in the words of the Talking Heads, same as it ever was, and it may never again be the same. I was recently invited to speak to a group of retired professional women with an array of impressive backgrounds. They asked what they could do to prepare, to resist, to help. I suggested they connect with and build resources within their home communities, being bold thinking enough to try to anticipate whatever might come. I told them to think of Ukraine. This is how they have survived, at least up to now, by finding ways to teach the children in makeshift classrooms, finding ways for ordinary people everywhere to learn basic medical skills and care for one another, inventing new systems to communicate where networks have been destroyed, employing neighborhood groups to allocate necessities, hosting concerts in subways to bolster hearts and minds, and more. All this, a sort of spontaneous reinvention when their basic systems, supply chains, and safety collapsed. This group of powerful women with whom I spoke just needed their fears and their concerns to be validated, that they might be needed to rebuild and should make ready to do so. Because the thieves and fascists and liars in the administration have already set the charges to demolish the government as we have known it. These greed zombies keep constantly and deliberately moving to disintegrate democracy. They intend to rule over us, to rob the resources and riches that come with the power they continue to seize more of, and to deny us the benefits we have come to rely on while we have lived in a democracy. Medical care, such as it was, education, safety, environmental protections, justice, law and order, support during disasters, reliable communication systems, medical research, libraries, museums, the arts, safe modes of transportation, equality, such as it was, our most beautiful public lands, parks, and monuments that are natural treasures, and a stable economy. You may find yourself believing or hoping that none of the things I've just mentioned will come to pass. You may see them moving to do these things, but you may find yourself believing that someone or something will stop them. You may want to go on with life as if none of the extraordinary things that are happening are real. You may find yourself wondering how you could possibly respond when the world as we know it begins to fall apart. Stay with me just a few minutes more. That story is coming. You may find yourself not fully recognizing where we are today. Or perhaps you do recognize it but don't know what to do. I think we are all with you if that's where you find yourself today. But this is important. We find ourselves being lied to and deceived, so we find ourselves needing to stay alert and to question everything they say, to seek the truth and to be ready to see beyond what is waved in front of us to distract us. Consider the Republicans in Congress. They proceed with the most unpopular and outrageous plans to demolish programs and earn benefits that Americans love and depend upon, as if they will never again have to face their constituents at the ballot box. Consider also that during a campaign event last year, Trump asked the crowd to vote for him just one more time, and
in 4 years you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
You may find yourself disregarding this or minimizing it as if it was just a host of spineless fools failing to do their jobs in the U.S. House and Senate, and a mindless boast. You may find yourself believing that the next election will restore balance, same as it ever was. But you may soon find yourself unable to vote freely or to have your vote counted fairly. You may find yourself needing a new government document to vote because you changed your name when you got married or for another reason. You may find it questioned even if you can and do provide it. You may find yourself no longer a citizen or on the path to citizenship. You may find yourself, or someone you know, or someone who lives in your community, deported to a concentration camp or prison in a shotgun shack in another world, whether or not you or they are a citizen. Because these things are already happening today, and this is where we find ourselves as a nation. You may find yourself thinking that what the media is focused on is what is real, same as it ever was. For example, they've had a great time following the ups and downs of the tariff spectacle, but consider Starlink and wait, I'll explain how the two connect. You may find yourself believing that Trump's tariff clown show is because he is a bumbling incompetent and is just doing things on a whim. Consider what is not in the headlines. The U.S. has been pushing small nations, poor nations, and even middle-sized nations facing steep tariffs to adopt Musk's Starlink satellite system to get relief from the punishing levies. And next, consider that the Federal Aviation Administration is now saying, without evidence, that current technology poses a risk to air travel safety, so they are adopting Starlink. Consider what Musk did. He moved to cancel the FAA, and his team of data junkies fired air traffic controllers. This is not the same as it ever was. You may find yourself in a world where the information and communications needed for life are controlled by a single system owned by the richest man in the world. And with the flip of a switch, planes could fall from the sky. People could lose touch with one another. Your travel could be restricted or tracked. Emergency systems could fail. Communications could black out, or your communications could no longer be private. You may find yourself in a web controlled by a cabal of evil, and you may find that you have been distracted from this by the charade of tariff jockeying while the real menace was being put in place. You may find yourself believing that the dwindling measure of law in this country will prevail. The courts are ruling against Trump, but the courts have no enforcers. They have no police force or army. But the Department of Defense does have an army, and consider that the current administration has recently established 2 national defense areas along the U.S.-Mexico border, effectively militarizing long stretches of New Mexico and Texas. The plan is to use the U.S. military as a de facto police force in these regions, creating a fake emergency, laying the groundwork for martial law. They expanded the control area of a military base for hundreds of miles to create this huge so-called defense area. They can expand to other areas too. You may find yourself in a place policed by brown shirts where you no longer have rights at all. You may find yourself focused on the chaos created when the Doge incels cited a motive to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse as a pretext for them to bore into all government systems and collect data on every American. Sensitive data, private data, data about our health, our finances, our personal identifiers, and more. But consider the value of that data for controlling us, for finding us if they choose to pursue us, for robbing us of what is ours, for selling information about us to foreign agents or commercial entities. And consider how hollowing out the government and firing all its employees and dismantling its agencies creates control. It sets up need and provides more dollars for the taking by the billionaire thieves at the top. You may find yourself believing that Trump is running the country. All eyes are on him and his antics all the time. Pay no attention to the Project 2025 cabal behind the curtain. Soon, you may find yourself without the retirement or health care benefits you paid into, without vaccines, treatments, or medicines when disease threatens, without a job, yours or someone's in your family, without the assets or investments you earned or set aside, without the protection of the law when you are robbed or raped or grabbed by armed and masked thugs on the street for speaking out or having the wrong color skin or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You may find yourself unable to send your child to a school that teaches the truth, or you may be forced to send your child to one that requires them to pray to a foreign god or to recite false propaganda. You may find yourself unable to speak out, to gather with friends, to move about freely, to have conversations in confidence without being heard by unknown entities. What we are up against is not just on the other side of where we are. It is in our midst. You may find yourself struggling to awaken to how bad things really are and how quickly they can become worse. What will you do? What should we all do? I wish I had a magic prescription. I wish I knew what would stem the tide of evil, break its advance, defeat it before it gets more pervasive. I don't. But as promised, I do have a story from the wild that might give you hope. This time, it is about people I know in a place I love, but it did not happen to me. I am retelling the story as it was told to me and others, as it was reported in the news, and as it was immortalized in a book the community published. In 2013, Colorado experienced an epic flood disaster. Torrential rains fell for 3 weeks. These 1,000-year rainstorms pelted the mountains until the ground became so supersaturated that it felt gelatinous to walk on. The rivers rose and surged out of their banks. The volunteer fire department I have regaled so often in my posts sprang into action. They went on patrol both inside and outside of the valley to warn folks who lived in low places and along the river that wound along beside the county highway. They rescued all those they could, going door to door before the roads began to fall away from the mountainsides. Dams broke, creeks swelled, the river turned to roaring whitewater, and the county highway running up and down the mountainside from the flats below to the national park above crumbled on either side of the valley, and whole sections of it washed over the slope, making the only way in and out of our home community impassable. I'm telling this story as they told it to me because my husband and I were away on one of our nomadic adventures when our home valley became instantly cut off. The community lost power. There was no way in or out. The residents came together. The little fire station became the civic center. The volunteer fire department quickly formed a Type 3 incident management team. The assistant fire chief became the de facto mayor. They appointed a security team to patrol and check on all the residents. Others took over supplies assessments. The EMTs set up a makeshift clinic in the tiny community room of the fire station. A Hale group formed a road building team. There was no cell coverage or broadband there then. The only communications were the fire radios and their connection to dispatch. The river had overrun the water plant that processed the area's drinking water, so hand crews started digging, and after days and days of relentless and arduous work, they managed to muck it out. With no electricity, many residents initially pooled food. Most kept a deep pantry of non-perishables, so no one went hungry. The little restaurant at the center of the valley had deep walk-ins that were thermally insulated by the building's construction in the side of a slope. The stores there and those brought by others provided some community meals for a time. No one imagined this scenario could go on and on for weeks, even months, before access in and out would be restored. A crew with pickaxes and shovels hacked a narrow trail next to the granite cliff wall on the inside of the broken highway so that bikers and hikers could get out to go to the nearby towns 8 miles up or down the mountain. One biker rode a powered bike up the mountain and returned with gas cans he suspended from a pole across his shoulders. He also brought a bag full of batteries for flashlights. When some residents began to run out of blood pressure medicine and other needed pharmaceuticals, a firefighter took a four-wheeler over rugged terrain to a nearby mountain hamlet to get some animal meds from a rural vet. A National Guard task force along the Front Range tried repeatedly to get a chopper in to bring needed food and water and to help the most vulnerable residents out, but rain stalled the process for some time. When they did finally make it in, the Type 3 team had already made a list of the residents who wanted or needed to be evacuated and had them ready with bags packed and pets in tow. Many stayed and began building a corduroy road along the track of an old wagon trail that had been unused for almost a century. Local youth moved rocks and debris while the firefighters cleared a path with Pulaskis and used their chainsaws to cut trees to lay across the soaked and uneven earth to make a track that might support all-terrain and four-wheel vehicles so that residents might eventually drive out. This was an incredible effort that took weeks of backbreaking work. When the road was finally ready for skilled drivers to use, most of the remaining residents slowly drove their vehicles in a community caravan with their most valued possessions inside down the newly constructed primitive track through open space and private land to a place where they could access an intact graded road. The county highway through the valley would take months to rebuild. Most homes in the community had to be shuttered for all that time while the residents found temporary lodging in the cities below, returned to work at their jobs, and got their kids back in school. Some people lost their homes in the valley, unable to pay for two places while they lived on the flats waiting. But those who stayed and those who returned months later when the county highway was open to through traffic again had a powerful sense of community and pride and the knowledge that they could find a way to survive and to care for themselves and one another together, no matter what. You may find yourselves thinking, I could never do that. But none of them did that alone. They did it together. They did it with open eyes and open hearts and open minds. They knew no one else was coming to save them, so they didn't wait. They didn't deny their reality, and they didn't fail to respond. They looked at where they found themselves, and they went to work to save their community and one another. You may find yourselves thinking about how you can roll up your sleeves and get in the fight now to save what we can of our democracy and our rights and freedoms. If that's the case, welcome. Let's get to work. This has been Sandy Alt reporting from the wild. Every week or so, I publish a written blog on Substack, and then a few days after, I produce a variation of the blog as a podcast like this one with original music, sound effects, and more. You can read and subscribe to the companion blog to this podcast on Substack at sandyalt.substack.com. I hope you'll subscribe and share it with your friends. A few lines here are quoted from a song by the Talking Heads called Once in a Lifetime. Look for it wherever you get your music. You may find yourself rocking out to its irresistible beat. And if you want more stories from the wild, look for my Wild Mystery series in book, audiobook, and ebook. You can start with any book in the series and go wild.